Soft pellets have been absolutely brilliant the whole way through the winter at so many venues. We know at some point swapping from soft pellets to hard pellets is going to be the right decision to make, but timing is crucial, and making that decision at the right point is really important. The most obvious sign it's time to switch to pellets is So you're joining me here today at the absolute stunning Monkhall Fishery. Now we've come up to the middle of March and I feel like we're going through a little bit of a transition period at the moment. So the air temperature and the water temperature is still quite low. Today the water temperature is 7.2 and the air temperature is very similar. But the time of day and the hours of light that we have at the moment is increasing. So I really do feel like the fish are really starting to eat. If you take much notice of the recent match results around the country, the weights really have started to increase. The match I fished the weekend, the winning weight was the biggest weight of that year. So I really do feel like the fish are starting to feed. So I think you need to be really cautious about how you're fishing your matches at the moment. Are you being positive enough? Recently, I've been fishing matches where soft pellets, fishing in the deeper water has been brilliant. But now we're fishing for bigger weights. I just don't think that's going to be positive enough. Today, I'm going to show you a few things about how to change in this transition period, what baits to use and what rigs I'm going to use today to catch more fish and to catch you that bigger weight to help you win more matches at the moment and in recent times. So I'm also going to be running a little competition for you today. I'm going to ask you a question at some point through the day. All you have to do is answer it and you'll get a chance of winning both the rigs that I'm going to be using today and hopefully catch a load of fish on. So there we go, that didn't take long at all. The great thing about fishing with hard pellets is that you always seem, if the fish want to eat them, you always seem to get a really quick response. I think what it is when you tap them in using our sprinkle pots, you can create a lot of noise. So as the pellets are going in, if you tap them in from like 18 inches to 2 foot off the water, it does create a lot of noise and it brings lots of fish into your peg. And for me, if you were going to pick a bait to get a quick reaction, pellets really is the bait. And in general, when you fish with hard pellets this time of year, you do catch the stamp of fish that you need to win. I mean, that's probably 2.5 pounds. If you're looking to catch 110, 120, you really don't need many fish at all. Now for me this time of year, in general, what tends to happen is because the water temperature is quite low, it's like 7.1 degrees today, what happens, the fish at the beginning of the day will be quite cagey. They won't want much bait at all. Then as the air temperature rises and maybe as the water temperature rises 1 or 2 degrees, towards the end of the day, the fish will feed a lot more aggressively. So one way of feeding your peg at the beginning of the match, which is brilliant, is to use the medium or the large toss pots, but to put the sprinkle lid on them. Fill your pot up with 4mm hard pellets. As you ship out, just dip your pellets under the water, which helps them keep them in the pot just a little bit better. Then when you get to your destination of where you've plumbed up to fish, it's just to turn your pot over maybe 18 inches to 2 foot off the water and just tap in maybe 10 to 15 pellets at the beginning. So I'm just going to turn my pot over about 18 inches to 2 foot off the water and just tap in. You can almost count them in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you just get a gauge of that's probably 15 to 20 pellets, and then you can start fishing. Now my estimation is with the medium cup you can probably fit about 50 to 60 pellets in there, which allows you to have 3 or 4 feeds. So now I've just fed, but 3, 4 to 5 minutes, if I don't get an indication of a fish in my peg, I can repeat the process. Fishing like this really does make sure that you never got a volume of bait on the bottom. So I can just keep tapping in my pellets, adjusting the amount that I'm tapping in, making noise. And for me, that's the best way of beginning your session with hard pellets. So there we go, that didn't take long at all. So basically, I caught that first F1, a real decent one. I filled my pot back up with my 50-60 pellets, gone in, probably tapped in like another 15, and then virtually straight away I had some indications, which shows me that the fish really are reacting to that noise of those pellets going in. Now one thing you have got to be careful of is that when those hard pellets are bringing those fish into your peg, if you're making too much noise with your pellets, the fish can come up off the bottom. So one thing you can do is just reduce the amount of noise that you're making with the pellets. I.e. when you're tapping them in, just tap them in from like 6 inches off the bottom, off the water, rather than like 18 inches. But to start off with, being this early into the session, tapping them in from like 18 inches, 2 foot, getting some fish into your peg initially really is key. And if you can start putting fish like this together, or that sort of stamp, and the first hour, if you can just catch maybe 6 to 8 of those fish to give you a real good start, it puts you in good stead for the rest of the match. And if you can have a really good second half of the match, which what tends to happen this time of year, that's how you put a match winning weight together. See, this is the great thing about fishing the line that we're fishing here. We're fishing in virtually the deepest part of our peg, but we're not fishing on any silt. Because we've plumbed up just onto that far shelf, we're fishing on rock hard bottom, which is really important. The fish are so much easier to catch when you fish on hard bottoms. But because we're in that depth of water, if we have had a cold night, which we did last night, maybe the temperatures went down to like 2-3 degrees. Fishing in that depth of water is brilliant at the start of the match. And like I said earlier, if you later on in the match, when the air temperature warms up 2-3 degrees and then the water temperature raises maybe 1 or 2 degrees, the fish might come up into that shallower water, i.e. across against the island or in the margins, which is why I've chose to fish my soft pellet in the margins. But fishing this line with hard pellets, creating that little bit of noise with your sprinkle pot, not putting too much bait in your peg at the beginning, just feeling your way into the match is an absolute brilliant way of starting your day. I hope you're enjoying the video so far. The fishing's been absolutely brilliant. But don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the Matrix channel so you never get to miss another Matrix video. And if you haven't got a YouTube account, why not open one? It's absolutely free of charge, and then that allows you to have more interaction with the Matrix videos, having more say on what we do in the future, and it will give you the chance to enter all of our competitions. Right, so we've had a brilliant start. We've plumbed up just on that shelf, just where it starts to come up towards the island. I've been tapping my hard pellets in like you've seen, but we've come up with a little bit of a problem now. So as I'm tapping in my pellets now, the fish are becoming quite aggressive the way that they're feeding. So So I'm tapping in my pellets and I can tell the fish are coming up off the bottom because I'm getting loads of indications on my float, and I've actually hooked a couple off the bottom. So you've got two options in this situation now. Either you can start picking up a catapult, start feeding and trying to catch shallow, but I think that's still a little bit too early in the year for that. The other option is to re-plumb up in a shallower spot and start your peg again. So I've plumbed up just there and we've started fishing there, which is about 4 inches up that shelf. I've just put another section on, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to creep up that shelf and just see what depth I can get into with another section on. So I've just come up to that 14-metre section with a short top kit and a short free, and I'm about 1 metre off the bottom, and it is about, I would say, about 2 foot shallower there, which for me is about bang on. Even though we've had a cold evening and the water temperature is still only 7.1, when I've been fishing in that deeper water, I can tell straight away that the fish really are wanting to feed, and fishing in that shallower water could be brilliant. So I've just literally slid my float down. I'm going to get to that point there where I've just plumbed up a second ago. And I reckon that is about perfect there. And that is a good 18 inches shallower than where we started. So what I'm going to do, literally trim my line down between my float and my pole tip, move my back shot down, start fishing in exactly the same way with my hard pellets, start tapping into more hard pellets, and I'm sure we'll have another good run. So we've started the day on that shelf, we've had a good run there. If I can get a really good run on this spot now, re-plumbing up, and then finish my day in the edge, we'll put a really good weight together. Well, there you go. I've shipped on another section, re-plumbed up in that 18 inches of shallower water, and I've tapped in my pellets exactly like what I was doing in that deeper water, and I've had indications straight away. And that's the number one thing I love most about hard pellets. You don't have to prime lines up. It's not like a case of for 30 minutes before you go on to a new position in your peg, you've got to feed and work at it. You can literally plumb up on a new spot, tap your pellets in, and expect to get bites straight away if you've moved to the correct position. And again, I mentioned it earlier, with hard pellets, you really do catch the stamp of fish that you need to win. I mean, look at that. It's absolutely massive F1. And that really is the fish that you need to win. You catch 30 or 40 of them through the day on your different lines in your edge, re-plumbing up across in that shallow water, which we should have a really good run on now. You're going to put a massive weight together. Well, there you go. That difference in depth is absolutely unbelievable. Considering we're using the same rig, we're feeding exactly the same, we're putting our bait in from the same height, the difference in the two swims is just incredible. So we've gone from a deeper swim, and I was getting loads of indications, a lot of line bites, I foul looked a couple of fish. I was still catching, but I could just tell it wasn't right. To a line 18 inches shallower. Now, I'm not getting any false indications on this line. The float's just sat there, and every now and again it just goes, flies under, and I've caught a big fish. Now that's telling me that I'm fishing in the correct depth now. These fish will sit at a certain depth and they'll move to the bottom, wherever that is, to feed. And I think I've found that depth now. And the depth that I'm fishing at now is very, very similar to the edge. So when it gets to the stage in the day where the fish start eating in the edges, hopefully I'm fishing in the correct depth that I'm going to have a real good end to my match. And I keep banging on about it, but if you look at the stamp of these fish, it's just incredible. Great big F1s. We've had some small carp as well, but these F1s really are the weight builders. So it's highlighted to me today about fishing in the correct depth with the correct bait. And it's quite actually very simple fishing, just tapping a few pellets in, making some noise. catching great big F1s like that. It has rarely been a mint day so far. So we've had a brilliant start to our session. We've caught on that first line just coming up the shelf. Then we've caught on that shallower line, fishing with hard pellets. I'm just going to take a couple of minutes away from the fishing and talk you through my hard pellet rig. Now, to start off with, if you've watched any other of my videos, then you would have known that I'm a big fan of using a longer hook length with the bulk just at the top of the hook length and one big dropper near the hook. But I've been fishing a lot of venues near me, and those venues do tend to have a big head of smaller fish in, i.e. roach, skimmers and fish like that. And fishing with that bulk and that big dropper near the hook is really, really good because it gets your rig to the bottom as quick as possible. The great thing about fishing at Monkhall and fishing with hard pellets, you just don't have to worry about that. There's not many small fish at all. Every fish that are in here is big quality fish. And with fishing hard pellets, you don't tend to hook many small fish. So I'm fishing with a bit of a different rig today. To start off with, I'm obviously using a hair rig with a band because I'm fishing with hard pellets. The band itself is a matrix medium band, which I love because I can use this band for all my pellet fishing and my shallow caster fishing. The days of having pins with bands for pellets, bands for caster, that's long gone with these bands. The hook itself is a size 16 Matrix X2 hook, eyed. Obviously I'm using a hair rig, so I've got to use an eyed hook to match that. The length of the hook length itself is 4 inches today, with 0.14 power micron line. Obviously I mentioned I like using that longer hook length, but I've got to use that shorter hook length today because I'm using a different shotting pattern. I'm actually using a tapered bulk. So I've got, like I said, I'm using a 4-inch hook length, and then the shotting pattern itself is just a one big length of strung out shot, starting the gap between the shot at the top at 1 inch, working his way down to 4-inch gaps. Now the great thing about fishing with a strung bulk like that is that you can lay your rig in and you can get more bites on the drop. And I'm sure these fish watch your hook bait as it come in. So fishing with that strung bulk really does work well. This float itself takes 7 number 9s. So I've got them strung out, like I said, with 2 number 11s just at the top, so I can nick one off, or if the light changes and I want to see just a little bit more float, I can nick one off, get a little bit more float showing. 0.18 power micron mainline, and that is a 0.4 slim carbon float. The bristle on it itself is 1.7 mils, which is brilliant because I can actually see it in a lot of difficult lights. Carbon stem, so if I am flicking my rig in to the side and catching fish on the drop, that will settle really nice and slow. And a slim body, so if I'm missing an odd bite, it just comes out of the water nice and slick. The length of line between my pole tip and my float is 22 inches, which I love fishing that length of line when I'm fishing 13, 14 meters. You're not moving your float around, you're not dragging your float out of your peg. I'm fishing with 2 big back shot. I've got 2 number 8s, one at about 10 to 15% and one about 40% between the pole tip and the float. The elastic itself is a Matrix Slick 10 to 12, and I've actually got one of our little Matrix Dacron beads on the actual elastic. Now the reason why I'm using this is because it actually sits just at the end of the top kit, and it will sit just inside that bush. And when you're fishing shallow, that little bit of grip there, and you can actually hear the bead just coming out the end of the bush, makes you hook an odd fish more. Obviously I'm not fishing shallower today, but all my top kits are set up so I can fish on the bottom or I can fish shallow. I do like fishing with a short top kit when I'm fishing these snake lakes. What I found with having a shorter length of elastic through your top kit, you just stay in control of your fish. And at the end of the day, the fish can't swim off that far because we've got an island across there. So using a short top kit really is essential for me. But that's it, that's my hard pellet rig. In general, when fishing with hard pellets, you don't have to worry about hooking too many small fish on the drop because you're fishing with a really positive bait. So set your rigs up like that when you're fishing with hard pellets, and I'm sure you're going to catch loads of fish. Right, so we've had a great start to our day, fishing across on hard pellets on those two different depths. But it's a little bit early, but I feel like the fish are feeding aggressively enough and they want enough bait that I can go in the edge at this point and hopefully get some bites. It would probably be about the halfway point now if we were in match situation, but like I said, when I went across and fished in those two different depths, that shallower depth was definitely better, which gives me a good insight that I could come down this edge and get some bites. I have chose to fish micros and expanders in the edge in that shallower water because micros are such an attractive bait to these fish. It will drag them in. Hard pellets, I feel like you're relying on the noise to bring the fish into your peg, but these micros, I think the smell and the texture of the bait really does drag them in. I have primed this line up prior to going on. I did just put, probably 15 minutes ago, I put like a kinder pot full in. So fingers crossed, if the fish want to be in the margins and they're looking for some bait, I should get some bites, some indications at this point now. And the other great thing is, if you do go in early in that margin, down those edges, and you can catch early, you're in a real great position then to finish high up in your matches or put a really great bag of fish together. So there's two ways of feeding your micros. You can feed them in the nature the same way as your hard pellets, where you actually use a sprinkle pot. You put the pot probably 18 inches off the top of the water, and sprinkle them in over a little bit of an area, making some noise. Or you can like clump them in, where you actually put the kinder pot into the water, let the water flush in the holes at the bottom of the kinder pot, and dunk them in one big dollop. I've chose to start the peg off just dunking them in, which is the more positive way, because if you can catch like that, you are going to put a real big weight together. But if I've started my peg like this and I don't catch, then maybe putting a sprinkle lid on, tapping them in from a foot to 18 inches off the water, making a little bit of noise, a little bit less bait, might be good. But like I said, I'm going to start off just dunking them in like I did then, and fingers crossed I can get some bites. Well, there you go. That really didn't take long at all. I did have a feeling after what I caught on hard pellets that we'd have a good end of the session down the edge, but I didn't think it'd be quite that quick. So I dunked that pot full of micros in, just fishing with a 4mm expander on the hook. Obviously it's shelving up there when I'm fishing in the edge, so I've just actually dunked it just a little bit down the shelf and just dragged my hook bait up just a touch. Now, I did really catch some big fish on hard pellets, but I would imagine when you fish in the edge they'll be just as big or maybe even bigger. But like I said, I've chose to fish micros and expander in that shallow water down the edge because I feel like that's going to be the best bait to drag these fish into the margins. And if you can have a real good end to your session or second half of your match, you put yourself in a really great position of putting a weight together or winning the match. I absolutely love fishing with pellets all year round, fishing them in different depths and fishing from hard pellets to soft pellets, and they've worked absolutely brilliant today. But one question I've got for you guys is, what's your match winning bait? Answer this question in the comments and give yourself a chance to win both the rigs that I've absolutely caught loads of fish on today. So that's a really great sign that we're catching this early in the edge. The first couple I've caught in the edge were really, really quick. Literally, I dunked my pot, let the float settle, just within 30 seconds, I've got one on. But the more I'm fishing down there now, the longer it's taking to get a bite after feeding. And I really do feel that if I was just to carry on giving them a full medium cup of micros every time, that the peg is going to start to fade out. So my next step is just to change the way I'm feeding my micros. So I'm going to go from dunking a whole potful in. I'm just going to put a sprinkle lid on, and I'm going to try just sprinkling them in from just off the top of the water. But I'm not going to put a whole kinder potful in every time. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to sprinkle in maybe a third of a cupful every time and give myself like 3 opportunities to get a bite. And I think with just a little bit less bait in the peg and maybe spread over just a bit more of an area, I might get like a second kick to the peg, if that makes sense. Obviously I've had a brilliant run dunking them, but I might get like a second run from changing the way I put them in before the line dies off. So what I'm going to do, obviously before I was tipping that whole pot in, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to go about 6 inches off the surface of the water, and I'm just going to sprinkle in like that many, probably a third of a cupful over a little bit of an area, and then hopefully, I might be wrong, but hopefully I should kickstart the peg again and get another good run. And if I can put 10 or a dozen fish in the net on this line before it starts to die, that's probably 25 to 30 pound, and if you can do that 2 or 3 times, you really are starting to bump your weight up. But yeah, I'm just going to I've just sprinkled them in, give that a couple of minutes. I might do it again. If that doesn't work, then obviously I'll go back to dunking. But it is just another option when fishing with micros in the margins, is just to sprinkle them in. Well, there you go, that's our first one, sprinkling in the pellets. I've got to be honest though, there wasn't much difference between sprinkling in them and dunking them in. It may be even a little bit longer with the sprinkling. It might be a case today that the fish are all sat at one level and they'll come in the edge to feed, but you have to give them a volume of bait to get them to come in. It might not be the case that just sprinkling in a few is right. That whole medium toss pot, wow, the size of that, great big F1. It might be a case that you have to feed a whole medium toss pot to bring the fish into the edge to be able to catch one. But we're going to keep fishing. It might be a case as well that if you just keep doing it, might get stronger and stronger. But this is the sort of stamp of fish that I was on about, that you're going to catch in the edge. Look at the size of that. Absolutely massive, and it doesn't take many bites. Even if it's taking you 5-6 minutes to get a bite in those margins, if you're catching fish of that stamp, you're just going to build a weight so quickly. So what I'm going to do now, obviously I've caught that one sprinkling, I'm just going to go back to dunking and see how long I can keep catching fall down there. Hopefully catch a few more of them, and then hopefully maybe end the session going back across and then back in the edge. But I'll see how it goes. But that edge line really is looking good now, catching pretty steady, and they're all big fish, so we're starting to put a real big weight together now. So that line does seem very consistent, my edge line with soft pellets. The only thing I will say is when I first dropped in down there, the time between bites was very, very quick, i.e. probably a minute to 2 minutes between bites. And the more I fish down there, the longer the time between bites. So it is starting to fade away. But I'm in a situation now that because I've had such a good run down that edge, my long line with pellets is at a long rest. So I should be able to go back across, start tapping in pellets and get bites really quickly. So which puts us in a great position for the rest of the day. What I can do, I can just have a good run down the edge, then a good run across, and then just keep nicking fish off those 2 lines, rotating them 2 lines all day. And that should take me to the end of the day, and that should put a real big weight together. But before I go back across on my hard pellets, I'm just going to take you through my edge soft pellet rig in more detail. My edge rig itself is very similar to my hard pellet rig. Like I touched on before, here at Monkhall you haven't got a big head of small nuisance fish, so you can fish with slightly different rigs to a lot of venues with small fish and nuisance fish. So I'll run you through the rig starting with the hook. We've got a size 16 X2 hook. I'm not actually using a hair rig on this rig because I want to hook my expanders. I'm not hair rigging them. A size 16 for me with a 4mm expander is absolutely perfect because I can sink that hook into the expander and totally hide it within inside the expander. The hook length itself again is a 4-inch hook length to 0.14 power micron. The float I'm using takes exactly the same shot as the float I was using across on hard pellets, and that's 7 number 9s and 2 number 11 trimmers. And again, I've gone for a strung bulk. I'm actually going to flick my rig in away from the bank, pop my bait in, and there's a very good chance I could get an odd bite on the drop today. The spacings of the shot are exactly the same again, so they start off at 1 inch and end at 4 inches. The main line itself is 0.18. The biggest difference between the two rigs though is the float itself. For fishing in the edge, when I'm fishing in 30 inches or less, I like using the Matrix Mudline float. They got a thicker bristle to start off with, which is a 2mm bristle. So if I do decide to fish with a bigger bait in the margin, i.e. like a big lump of luncheon meat, double worm, a big bunch of dead maggots, that bristle really does accommodate that. They've got a nice thick fiberglass stem, so when you actually lay your rig in, they settle really quickly. So if I was to fish in lesser water than 30 inches and do go for a bulk, I can lay my rig in, it'll just go dunk and settle really quickly. A really robust round body shape. 2 number 8 back shot exactly again, with 22 inches of line between my pole tip and the float. Obviously today when I'm fishing in the edge, I'm fishing in 30 inches and the water here is dyed, so it's not the most coloured of water. So the last thing I would ever want is like 8 inches of line, so my pole tip's right over where I'm fishing. That 22 inches of line just gets that pole tip up away from where you're fishing. The elastic, exactly the same again. We've got a 10 to 12 slick and I've gone for a Dacron bead reversed round. The pot itself that I'm using is the medium toss pot. And again, I've gone for a short top kit. These fish really aren't going to run off. These lakes are very narrow, so just using those short kits really does keep you in control and really does speed you up when it comes to netting the fish. But again, a really nice, simple, balanced rig in that depth of water with that float, it really does work well. Well, that's the end of our session. We've had an absolutely amazing day here at Monkhall Fishery. Thanks to Ben and the guys for letting me come on today and shoot the video. We've caught loads of fish fishing across on hard pellets. We've also caught a load of fish in the edge fishing with soft pellets. And we've bounced between the two lines all day and kept fish coming. We're going through a little bit of a transition period at the moment, coming out of a really cold period, going into a bit of a warmer period. And the fish really are starting to wake up. The days are longer and the match weights are increasing. So we've had an absolutely fantastic day. Hopefully, if you can take a few of the points that I've shown you today, you're going to catch you a lot more fish. Don't forget to enter the little competition, answer the question to give yourself a chance of winning both rigs that I've used today. I hope to see you on the bank very shortly.